If we turn to look at some of the challenges and some of the not so wonderful things, one of the first ones is AI is going to have a major impact on employment. It's not totally clear, but a lot of people, particularly in admin type roles, could end up losing their jobs. Like all technologies, it has the capacity for abuse. We're all fully aware of how the social networks on the internet can be used to influence elections, distort reality, and promote fake news or even other forms of harm. So both those things exist at the same time, side by side. And the question is looking at specific proposals and ideas and seeing what each of them does in the balance between harm and benefit to society.
Welcome back to Sustainable LatAm, a podcast where we explore the intersection of innovation, economics, and sustainability across Latin America. I'm Alberto Subiron, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Andrew Thompson and Julian Seydoux. Today, we are tackling the biggest technological shift of our generation, artificial intelligence. But we aren't going to talk about Silicon Valley. That makes no sense if we're following Latin America. But we are talking about what the AI revolution actually looks like in the ground from Mexico to Patagonia. Our region, Latin America, is already incredibly connected. If we look at data, we know that around 80% of our population has a smartphone in their pocket. However, the region is facing a massive digital capital gap. So the question comes, obviously, are we going to use AI to create a new class of highly productive digital citizens? Are we going to do a leapfrog for our economies moving forward? Or are we just going to stay behind, depending on foreign models and just consuming but not innovating? Obviously, there are a lot of challenges for the region, from supply chains, the creation of data centers, and the lack of water in certain countries, a lot of water in others, infrastructure, lack of policies. There are a lot of challenges that we need to look at. But there's also a lot of opportunities behind. With that, I would begin probably with you, Andrew, that you have recently created a report around data centers in Latin America. And I will ask straightforward, what are the main opportunities and the main challenges for the regions when we are talking about AI adoption?
I think in the AI adoption, if we start by the opportunities, here is a technology which allows machines to do what humans do in some contexts, but much faster and more efficiently. So all sorts of basic processing work can now be done by AI assistants. And it doesn't end the role of humans, but it, if you like, gives additional techniques and things that can be done. To give you an example, there's an AI robot in Brazil that does precision agriculture that goes around identifying weeds in the fields while powered from solar panels on its back. And it does a job that would normally be done by farmers faster and more efficiently. If we turn to look at some of the challenges and some of the not so wonderful things, one of the first ones is AI is going to have a major impact on employment. It's not totally clear, but a lot of people, particularly in admin type roles, could end up losing their jobs. Like all technologies, it has the capacity for abuse. And we're all fully aware of how the social networks on the internet can be used to influence elections, distort reality, and promote fake news or even other forms of harm. So both those things exist at the same time, side by side. And the question is looking at specific proposals and ideas and seeing what each of them does in the balance between harm and benefit to society.
Thanks, Andrew. That's a good approach in terms of the risks and opportunities. Let's talk a little bit in terms of supply chains. Julian, you are well versed in that area. So When you see AI in Latin America, what do you see?
I see money. I see dollar bills floating around, and RMBs are probably, and perhaps euros too. I think AI is a massive opportunity for Latin American countries, and this is effectively driven by the more advanced economies and the AI demands from, whether it's from the US or China, and whoever wants to compete and follow suit. So in order to do that, there's a huge demand of, it's not like a traditional software where you just you can replicate and something appears in the cloud and then you can just scale it up easily. AI needs, I was watching some interview by, I think, the head of commodities of Goldman Sachs or someone, and I think he was right in pointing out that at the end of the day, AI is really the commodity driven. Right at the beginning of the supply chain, you need natural resources, and that means that you need a lot of it, especially if you're going to an AI-driven economy in the States, but also in Latin America and anywhere. So much so that there's not enough at this present moment. And my take of the new Trump row doctrine, I don't know if it's called this anymore, but the of across LatAm is really driven by the need for energy, the need for rare earth minerals, resources of all kinds, all types of minerals. We're talking about lithium, copper, anything that is part of the AI supply chain, of which the southern continent is full of. And this is basically, you have a really hungry neighbor for all of this. And if I just take one additional point, which is a really strong signal in my view, is that there was an article by the FT mentioning that the Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel had recently moved to Buenos Aires, and Argentina, who has with Milei, a very libertarian leader, has recently been changing some of the laws also to, from what we understand, first of its kind, allowing non-human corporations. That's basically legal entities that are run by agents. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible on the one side, but let me interrupt you there. I will tell two things that could be controversial, and I would like to have your reply for both of you. There's no doubt that the region is incredibly rich in terms of natural resources, especially water, critical minerals, rare earth minerals. We're talking about 15 to 20%, if not more, of resources that the AI economy is using, are going to use. But here's the question. Is Latin America destined to just supply these critical minerals, or can begin to work a little bit and use these resources also to become more independent, to we say, or more productive? We cannot forget that one of the key elements of the AI economy is that can increase productivity a lot in any country, and the most advanced economies are looking for that. So we have to ask ourselves, the region has a massive opportunity to probably supply this trend, but also take advantage of it and produce something around, and don't just become a supplier of commodities.
So I'm not quite sure about this productivity mantra that is mentioned everywhere. So yes, so I run AI-driven companies, and yes, in my field, so we produce financial research on companies. And in that field, a long time ago, when I was working for a large blue chip corporation, a rating agency in Europe, and you would cover about 20 names and the US would be covering 40 names per analyst, which meant that the US was double simply because all the data was more integrated and you would receive more data immediately. Today, with what I'm doing, I'm covering about 600 to 800 firms. And I would feel just as comfortable today about my 600 firms as I was with my 20 or so a long time ago. So there is a gain of productivity here, but there's also a huge loss for the need of people. And I think that's what some of the economies which are more advanced in AI or completely launching into that will have to start facing, is to what extent do you need people for certain activities? And it will come. I think most businesses at this stage will have to grasp about what do they actually need, how they will interact, what are the new workflows, the new processes driven by AI, what does this mean? Is my output as a, say, financial research company better than, say, lots of humans doing the same work? Is it a different way? So everyone has got its place, but then it's also a question of economics about the cost of production, say, a financial research. So financial research, for me, costs very little compared to, say, a bunch of investment bankers, analysts who would be analyzing a company and taking a lot of time and doing a great job, whatever they're doing, of course, but it's just a simple matter of cost at some stage. And what does it mean as you start competing in the market? Now that goes across to all types of industries and all types of things. And this is why I feel that the move from Peter Thiel to go down to Argentina at the same time as this non-agile, non-corporation or non-human corporation comes along is really one to watch. I would come back to, but right now, right before I go into this, I just want to step back, because when we talk about supply chain, in order to build the AI, the economy, so perhaps we need to understand what is AI. And so there was an interview by the Mistral, which is one of the European large language model CEO, that was done recently, whereby he basically explains it, I think, very well. He describes AI as the business of converting raw energy into intelligence. And so he basically says that electricity feeds into the data centers and then generate tokens, which are then used for basically the power is turned into a code that is a form of intelligence that can be deployed and workflows and everything. But so if I cut this in two halves, there's one aspect which is about all the energy that has to go into these huge infrastructures in order to turn this into intelligence. And then the other half is all about what do you do with this intelligence or the production of that tokens, and that can disrupt entire industries and everything that goes with it. I think we're still at the first half, which is about building these data centers, as Andrew was mentioning, building the infrastructure, getting the energy into these data centers. And by some reports, it was saying that the US needs about 100 gigawatts of additional energy.
Yeah.
We're far from it at the moment. So, but in order to do this, you need a lot of raw natural resources. You need the energy, you need the petrol, you need the oil, which for me explains a lot of what the US is currently doing at the moment at the geopolitical level, if they want to compete with, say, China or whoever. But that also, on the positive side for Latin America, which is rich in all of these aspects, is that all of this translates into dollars, because you need to acquire, you need to buy, and you need to effectively transfer monetary value in order to get access to these assets. And that's a massive opportunity, especially if you have competing powers who are trying to buy the same thing, because there's not an infinite amount of all these resources at present. And maybe I put it out there, this is speculative, but maybe what is SpaceX and what Elon Musk is trying, which he's alluded before, was if there's a finite amount of resources on Earth, then you need to get it from elsewhere. And there's talks about meteorites and how to access lots of these rare earth minerals or what else from meteorites, which may be the future. But
that was Jeff Bezos, by the way.
Or Jeff.
Andrew.
I just want to, sorry, I want to go back to the question that you raised, Alberto, which I think was about extractivism. How can Latin America protect itself from just producing the water, the power, the minerals that go north, and they only see a small share of value added? And my suggestion would be, it depends very much on the industry and the way those industries are being set up. If you look specifically at Brazil, there have been talks with the US, with the Trump presidency, on the US gaining access to rare earth materials from Brazil, which has them in some plenty. The issue, however, is that they all need quite sophisticated refining processes and extraction from more general ores. And that probably gives the US an upper hand. Brazil will struggle to get a lot of the refining done within Brazil. But if you jump into a completely different industry, if you look at defense, Brazil recently took delivery of the first Gripen jet fighter under a very big contract with Sweden, which was negotiated about 20 years ago or so. And there is, I think the total production is 36 fighters, of which 10, by the agreement signed by President Lula in an earlier presidency, those 10 are being produced in Brazil. So there is some scope for trying to keep value added in the country of origin, but it depends very much on the industry. And sometimes the state of the industry is not favorable. Like, for example, Latin American countries have yet to build battery factories because it makes a bit more economic sense to do it close to the point of car assembly.
Absolutely. So I would say I'd add to that, which is, I think is a very valid point. But the model that you just described is exactly what China did for many years, the transfer of knowledge into their shores. The other point that I would make here is that when you have ChatGPT or whatever it is, whatever large language model that exists, actually the access to intelligence and to produce some of these, it's not so much the case that you need specific knowledge from a country that they have and control the IP, or very hard for a country to just say impede something which now is actually quite common. So if we take the battery, for instance, they just described, actually the knowledge is probably out there already somewhere. It's just a question of people grabbing it and just making something of it. And so in order to turn that into, say, a proper battery manufacturer, it's not so much that you need people to fly in and to understand language and can set it up. You probably have some Brazilians that can do it, or anywhere across Latin America. It's more the question that whether they have the sufficient investment to actually build it and build on top of it, or build the same thing. And this is where I think the opportunity lies fundamentally for Latin American countries, is because they have something, or they have lots of things that everyone needs. And it's for the countries to be able to redistribute perhaps towards these area of higher value add, so endeavors. But they don't need so much the talent from outside anymore. They just need the money to actually do it. So they can. This is where trades becomes interesting with the various parties.
I agree. Definitely, as you said before, Julian, when we see AI, we can see dollar signs or money or whatever. There is a huge opportunity. There are also risks as well. I want to dig into things. One is our socio-economic reality in Latin America, a country that has a huge level of informality. And I make a social question because I heard this several times, that AI actually can help to overcome this problem of informality in the region, basically, by using AI on a law. Because when we're talking on informality, sometimes we're thinking in an economy that is hiding around, but is highly productive sometimes. So maybe we can make a jump. And I'm asking, I see you, Andrew, that are happy trying to answer that. So if you do with Mike in that area.
Okay, there's a company in Mexico called Clip, and what it does is it uses AI assistants to have conversations with potential banking customers, and it's focusing those people who are known as the unbanked, people who are very much in the informal economy, and it is trying to, how successful may be open to debate, but it is trying to present them with an easier way of talking and presenting information about information you have to give when you open a bank account. You go through forms after forms, and this system has been made simpler and faster in an attempt to bridge the gap between the informal sector and the official, more formal sector of the economy. So I agree with you. The informal sector in many Latin American economies is 40, 50% of the economy, and in some cases it's even higher. So if new technology can be used to bridge that gap and be more financially inclusive, there's a possibility, it's a potential win-win solution where the customers get access to social services, health and education better than before. The government gets more tax revenue, and the overall effect is positive.
These are the opportunities. Obviously, there are challenges as well. You mentioned just earlier, Andrew, there are some side effects that we're seeing, especially in terms of employment. We discussed in a previous episode when we were talking about Central America, the impact that the adoption of AI is having on just countries like Guatemala, for example, who has a huge industry based on the attention centers that they provide to developing countries are going to disappear because AI is basically replacing all of this. And this is just one example. It's coming around. So with opportunities coming risks as well. But I would say that probably we have to question ourselves how ready is the regions to make this transition from one side to another, because probably that is going to be the key element. And probably a lot of legislation is going to need. I think, Julian, you mentioned really well, it's going to depend a lot of the same states to distribute the opportunities that AI is providing. And probably the big opportunity is that this money is going to come inside the countries and can help do the leap forward. But obviously there are challenges. I would like to another element, something that you mentioned, Julian, and is our friend Milei and his proposal of the AI corporation, that's non-human corporations. There were some response from intellectuals across the world, with coming from Martin Wolf from DFT, but a historian, Hariri, who was talking about the risks of just allowing this. So I would like to dig a little bit deeper, and I will go with you, Julian. How do you see this is something that could be a massive opportunity or is something credible? And what risks do you see on this? Probably what will be needed?
Well, I think this is where there's a huge risks linked to artificial intelligence across the board for all countries, for everyone, and we don't really know what it is now. At the same time, there's a huge opportunity, which actually, interestingly enough, seems to be more the opportunity is now. So, for instance, if I imagine that if you wanted to, if you're operating at the forefront of AI and you'd want to have agents and set up businesses or whatever, going to Argentina right now and setting up there is probably not a bad idea, especially if you think that Argentina has pretty much everything right there at its doorsteps. So if you talk about data centers, you can probably build in Patagonia, having the cooling effect. You have the energy from the north or from the Vaca Muerta or for whatever. You have lithium a bit further up. You have resources across the board. If you need extra talent, you have lots of agri businesses that can feed you. So it's not a bad place for talent to be, and for of course between now and then is huge investments that need to be done to link the entire countries and to do lots of things at some stage. But who says that it cannot be possible? But the opportunity is there for the country, because that may attract huge amounts of investments by itself, and therefore there will be some value going to the local populations and promoting economic growth. And if these non-AI or non-human corporations are more competitive than human corporations, then that will cause by itself huge problems for human-led corporations or human corporations across the world. And we live in a competitive world, and that's the key factor. It's about understanding what are the competitive things that can be done, and regulations can only help you up to a certain extent, because if you manage under deregulation to create, and we saw it all over the place, so regulations can help you to maybe protect your own economics of certain markets or certain industries for a certain amount of time. But at some stage, maybe everything is too costly versus a non-human corporations or whatever. So everything needs to be redesigned, which are huge long-term risks. Whilst in the short term, the opportunities for lots of people is like a gold rush, lots of people to get involved in whichever part of the supply chain, be it right at the beginning to right at the end, where you have product and services that are being developed thanks to this intelligence that is being transferred from energy to intelligence.
I'd like to jump in with a very dark response. And I
Go ahead, Andrew.
my Argentine friends will forgive me. I think this is a problem now and has been a problem in the past. Whenever Argentina discovers great riches, it then enters a period of political instability. And the culture of get rich quick leads to major macroeconomic problems. So I fear that if Argentina has something like $20 billion being invested in Vaca Muerta, with something like 25 billion being invested in a data center in Patagonia, lithium and so on, that the actual management of the macro economy may not be up to speed and able to cope with large inflows of money. And in fact, if you look at Argentina history over the last 5 decades, it's all been about mini booms followed by awful, disastrous recessions. And you'd want in a AI new world to have boom, but not to have the associated recession.
I think that's the massive. There's a LatAm risk premium across all countries, and that's of course something that may be high up in the mind. But at the same time, you have to remember Peter Thiel's moved there. I think there were talks about Elon Musk having bought or having some presence in the lithium area at some stage. The Americans or Displacements basically forced, or I don't know if you forced, but brought together a huge number of parties to help with a credit line, the Milei government. So there's a range of things that seem to imply that there's already, it's no longer only dependent on the locals. There's interference, positive or negative, bid your view, whatever, but from the outside already with the eye for this. And you could argue you have the same thing across many other countries. We know that the US government is really implicated in all of these little things. They're making investment into smaller entities that are. We saw that they made announced an investment into, I can't remember the name of this big blue chip firm, Intel or whatever it was in the States, that suddenly saw its share price rise exponentially, with Trump posting on somewhere that this is what I did, and good investment. But it's a much more proactive government across what it does than say previously. So I think these are the challenges, and of course, because if you hold lots of resources, other powers may not want you to we see it everywhere, may not want you to have the stronghold of all the resources of a particular type. And this is where China comes in. You have geopolitical interference. Maybe the EU decides to wake up and start acting also in a more aggressive manner than it has done previously. So there's a range of things that are negative connotation, which we all know have happened in the past for commodity-driven countries. whether it's depending on oil and gas or all these things. It just has happened. The difference with AI is, however, a bit more significant because it's really something that, as I mentioned before, you no longer, so technology of AI, intelligence is available for everyone with a smartphone. You can have intelligence in your smartphone today. So no wonder, and you can see this hunger for intelligence across Latin America, since they did download something like 15% of all global downloads for LLMs are done in Latin America, and so there's a lot of people are doing it. People are learning or becoming wiser, and as soon as they have it download or even in front of them on their smartphone or the computers or whatever, then the rapport de force between what you are doing and everyone else changes somewhat, which perhaps makes it more local for certain things, and things change radically across the board. But we'll come back to the initial point, which is right at the beginning, there's dollar value transfers from the people that have dollars to buy something, and that's the initial opportunity. The longer term opportunities are full of challenges because of the risks that you are mentioning, Andrew, because of the risks that are embedded with geopolitical aspects, because of all these things, and the disruptions that it will have in every industries, which we cannot foresee at the moment.
I will jump there in because I think all what we're saying now is in terms of risks and opportunities, which there's always come. But one element, and Julian has mentioned that in a way, what can make the difference here is if you have a good policy going around that. And each country in Latin America will need to think that from creation of regulations, laws, and anything. It's quite significant that of all the countries in Latin America, only Peru is the only country who has a full AI law to say that is completely approved, while Brazil and Mexico has advanced on it, but is still not full approved. It's interesting to see that, that's a general trend in the world because we don't know yet, but it's really interesting that in the region, especially Peru, Brazil, Mexico, are following the EU lead in terms of legislation to try to use AI. But here comes the question that this comes regulation on one side, the other element is education. And I think the policy also will need to prevent what we call a brain drain of Latin American engineers who end in just working remotely for American companies instead of trying to be more productive or increase. And also this legislation, as we're saying, we will need to probably have the opportunity now to adapt in order to overcome old problems in the region like informality. In terms of finance, Julian, you already mentioned that, and I think we all agree, AI can become a really real opportunity in terms of finance that helps the regions. But we are going to need probably a good policy development around. I give the mic to any of you to look at this and let me know if I am too optimist or too pessimist. So,
no, I think you're, yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Alberto. There are some huge challenges just coming back. Create data centers and all these things. There's an ecological price, and
don't just
Latin America is already fighting ecologically versus the agribusinesses and so on. To some extent, there's a concern about the Amazon, the reduction of it, deforestation, and so on. But going forward, you have water. That is, huge amounts of waters are needed. There's potential disruptions in not just about people's work, but also the general ecosystem that people live in. When you start developing or opening up these centers and or foraging further for access to resources and so on. So I think there's a lot that needs to be put in place for truly capture all the value and minimize some of the costs that are associated with the value capture.
I think that I'm in favor of regulation, but it needs to be the right type. It needs to be relatively light. You don't want to create so many barriers to entry that you rule out innovation and small startup companies, which is what you need. The only other thing I'd say is there will be an AI scandal or crisis at some point in the near future, just as there have been scandals or crises to do with the new World Wide Web or other things. And I think it'll be interesting because that will probably give the legislators in the countries you were mentioning, Alberto, it will give them a bit of a kick up the backside to say, you better get on and finalize proposals for a regulatory regime.
With this, I think we covered a lot, but I will go with something that you always go, Andrew, and it says, let's do a leap forward in time, 50 years from now. Where do you see Latin America in terms of AI from now to 50 years on? Julian.
Oh, no, please.
I want to begin.
Most commentators are saying that some serious people who, and especially from the AI labs and so on at the forefront, say that within the next couple of years we'll have AGI, superintelligence on the planet, which will be, and no one knows what happens after this. Is this concept of the singularity event, which is everything before this comes on board, and then after you probably don't know at what stage when you reach the tipping point to the other side, but you're already under control. And so in 50 years, if I go by just what people say, 50 years, we have no idea. I'll be surprised if we're in 2026, in 5 years' time, I'll be lucky to understand exactly where we are. But having said that, in order to create this AGI or this competitive AIs, which I think is what, so my instinct is that actually competition, even amongst AI, is what will save us. Is that everyone's trying to create their own AI, and therefore there will be different AIs competing. And but that will come quite soon, and that will, in the initial disruptions for the economy that goes beyond this, where AI is taking over basically a lot of things, are quite significant. People talk about universal, whatever you call it, payment for every workers, because simply most of jobs would have been taken by AI, which is quite possible. From what we can see at this present today, going into the future, is a possibility that exists? Possibly. There was a tweet which I saw, which was recently, which was relayed by Elon Musk about, I think someone said, one of the other Silicon Valley gurus saying, there will be 5 million robots, and imagine what it will be right now. Imagine what we have when we have 10 billion robots all over the world. Well, I question this because, of course, 10 billion robots adds a lot of. You reduce the space. I'm not sure I have enough space for more robots, for one robot for each person in my family to live in the same space. But even if I did, that's they will do. If they do everything, what is it that they will do? If everything's automated, digitalized, robots are doing it, and this disrupts things fundamentally all over, and it comes hard and fast when it starts going. And those are the big, for society, these are the big challenges. And I think when we talk about regulations, we talk about, the thought here for me is, how do you slow down the process so that people can actually comprehend what's going on and adapt to this new reality of AI?
I'd just like to take an opposing view on a whim. I think that over the next 50 years, progress is going to be slower than we expect, because it'll take some time for AI systems to be fully incorporated into companies and corporations. People will be quite bluntly scared of what AI can do. And perhaps the comparison is putting a man on the moon, which was done in the 1960s. And then we somehow never went back for the following 50 years or thereabouts. And we're going to come back now. So what I'm trying to say is that looking forward, progress won't necessarily be linear. It'll be by fits and starts, and there may be periods of not very much happening, and worries over the issues that the technology creates?
I will go, in my view of the next 50 years, I will say two things. One thing we are all sure, AI is probably the most consequential technology that is coming now in our times. And for somebody who loves history like myself, and I always says, we have to ask ourselves, what was the world view from somebody in the early stages of the Industrial Revolution who were completely used to do things in a completely different way, medieval, agricultural way of doing, and the Industrial Revolution comes around that. The huge disruptions come. And as you say, Andrew, it wasn't linear. It's coming ups, downs, and a lot of crisis in the middle. So probably it's going to be like this. But there is huge opportunities. There are going to be a lot of changes. I am with Julian in that area. I would say in 50 years, a lot is going to change. If this, in the way that I'm saying, all that I can say in Latin America is, in 50 years, the region is going to be completely different, shaping a lot with AI, but we really don't know what this change is going to be yet. And we're just at the beginning of this. With this, I say that I think we covered a lot, so I will say thank you to both of you. It was a really entertaining conversation today.
Thank you.
And I hope that, well, we will continue covering. We have a lot of coming around. We will have also analyzing the region. We have elections in Colombia, Peru, and all the uncertainties. But also we are going to talk about Brazil. A lot of topics going around that from the economic, political, and social perspective, as always. With this, I say to everybody, until the next time. Bye-bye.